What's going on, everyone? It's JDC here. Today we're talking about Gary Trent Jr. on the Raptors and why I think he's one of the better fits on the Raptors right now. And honestly, I really like his game, what he does for the Raptors, and we're just gonna be talking about Gary Trent Jr. and why he's gonna be very great for the Raptors moving on. So, what's up? My name is JDC. If you guys like the video, drop a like down below, press the sub button. We do NBA content here, but mostly Houston Rockets. But we've been sprinkling in some NBA content because for right now, NBA content and Houston Rockets content is kind of dry, so kind of mixing in each and every team right now here and there. So, and today we have the Raptors video. So if you guys like what you see, drop a like down below, press the sub button, and let's get into the video. So Gary Trent Jr., I decided to do a video on him because I haven't seen too many videos on Gary Trent, and honestly, I really like his game, even from when he was in Portland. I mean, over the season, did average 15 points per game, did average 3 rebounds, and did average 1 assist. Very great stats for someone that's only 22 years old too, 6'5", 209 pounds. He can play the shooting guard very well alongside Fred VanVleet. The starting five for the Raptors is probably be looking like Fred VanVleet at the start of the season too. So VanVleet, probably Gary Trent Jr. at the shooting guard, OG Anunoby at the 3, if he's not injured obviously. At the 4, probably either Chris Boucher or Scotty Barnes, either one of them, because Siakam's going to be out for a little bit with that shoulder surgery. And then 5, obviously Khem Birch. So Gary Trent Jr., I think he's going to play very well alongside Fred VanVleet. Good spot up shooter, did shoot 39% from the 3-point line, which is absolutely amazing. Then did shoot 41% from the field. So Gary Trent Jr. was absolutely amazing for the Toronto Raptors, and that trade with Norman Powell for Gary Trent Jr. was actually very great for each team. I mean, the Portland Trail Blazers, they got a good role-playing 3 that they desperately needed because they didn't really have a 3 at that time. Norman Powell fits in with that team very well, 3-point shooting and defense, a little bit of playmaking. And then the Toronto Raptors did get a 22-year-old who's fitting in with their time frame very well, alongside with people like Fred VanVleet, who's only 27, Scotty Barnes, who's only 19, OG Anunoby is only 24. So Gary Trent Jr. fits the team very well, and I honestly like that trade for each team. So, and then with Portland, obviously, he played 41 games with them, did average 15 points per game, 2 rebounds, and then 1 assist. So, didn't really change in terms of stats. Now with Toronto, he did average 16 points per game, did average 4 rebounds, did average 1 assist. Gary Trent Jr., he only played 17 games with them too. He did get traded at the trade deadline, obviously, for Norman Powell's trade up. So, Gary Trent Jr., I definitely think he's going to be a very great player for this Raptors team, especially because how young they are and how they're trying to prove themselves in this league to be one of the better younger teams in the league. Because I feel like a lot of people are really sleeping on the Raptors because they lost Kyle Lowry, they don't have Kawhi Leonard anymore, obviously, so they don't really have too much to work with other than Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. So adding in those two, plus a lot of good role players, Scotty Barnes, the 4th overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft, and then adding in people like Chris Boucher is pretty underrated, who had almost an MIP caliber season. Gary Trent, obviously, we know he can do, good 3-point shooter. I think this team definitely has something to prove. They have a lot of chips on their shoulders. Gary Trent Jr., I think the Portland Trail Blazers kind of gave up on him a little bit too early. He definitely was playing very well for them. Did obviously shoot, what was it, 30, actually he did shoot 40% from the field from 3-point range with the Blazers, and then did shoot 41% from the field overall. So I think the Blazers definitely gave up on him a little bit too early. The Raptors with Norman Powell, he was also very good for them, but didn't really fit in with their time frame. He probably was going to leave in free agency anyways, because at that time they were still very bad. So making a trade for Gary Trent Jr., who is just 22 years old, fits in with their time frame, fits in with what they're trying to do right now, which is not win anything remotely close to a championship, but trying to sneak into at least the play-in or the playoffs, kind of like the Houston Rockets type of situation, where they do have people like John Wall and Eric Gordon, and have all these good young pieces, Christian Wood, Kevin Porter Jr., and then making in at least the play-in tournament to at least maybe make it in the 8th seed to probably get bounced out of the first round, which is definitely realistic for the Raptors because they do have some good players on this team. I mean, OG Anunoby, definitely an underrated defender. Chris Boucher off the bench is going to be very amazing alongside Malachi Flynn, Scotty Barnes. We got all these good players. Precious Achiuwa, who I forgot is still here. So the Toronto Raptors, they have a ton of great guys on the team, and obviously I'm from Canada. I get their games for free on my cable TV, so I watch their games here and there, and I'm honestly impressed with what they do. I remember like in the regular season, the Houston Rockets versus the Raptors, and the Rockets, they broke their 20-game losing streak beating the Raptors. So I have to point that out there because I'm a Rockets fan. So the Gary Trent Jr., I definitely think he's going to be one of the better pieces on the roster. The Raptors do own their pick. Actually, they own all their first round picks until 2027, so that's pretty good for them. If they do decide to be bad next season again, which they probably, it really just depends on how each player plays, but I definitely think they're going to try sneaking into the play-in slash playoffs. If they are bad and they decide to be bad and they get the first overall pick, Chet Holmgren on this team would be absolutely electrifying, because they do need a good center on this team, with Kem Birch being a really solid center for them, but nothing too crazy in terms of potential and talent. So bringing in Chet Holmgren, who's going to be 19 years old, someone that can play the center at a very high level, I think it's going to be very great for them, adding into how well he fits in with the time frame and what they're trying to build here. The Raptors are already set for the future with obviously Nick Nurse and Masai Ujiri, who quite honestly is one of my favorite GMs in the league. Masai Ujiri besides Raphael Stone, and I guess Daryl Morey too, because Rockets. So Nick Nurse, probably one of the better coaches in the league, and was really good for that 2018-2019 Raptors team. So I definitely think Gary Trent Jr. is going to be here to stay. He did sign a 3-year, $54 million deal with the Raptors, and it was with a player option too. So you can kind of take that with a grain of salt, because if he decides to be good and at the end of his career, well, not end of the career, but at the end of his contract, if he is pretty good, then he's going to opt into his player contract, which is going to be okay for them. But then if he doesn't, pan out really well for the Raptors, then he can decide to leave and decline his player option, which he probably, I don't know why you would decline a player option other than like you don't really like the team, but you're getting free money, kind of like what John Wall is doing, where he has a $44 million player option he's going to get, or something around there. He's going to opt into that, obviously, because he wants the money, so kind of makes sense to opting into your player option. Avery Bradley didn't do it, or at least it was a team option, which made sense, but if Avery Bradley had a player option, he probably would have opted into it. It really just depends on what team you're on, and what type of money you're getting. But I think Gary Trent Jr., I think he loves it here in Toronto. He is only 22 years old, like I said before. Good shooting guard. I think he's going to be the starting shooting guard for a long time here. And within like the next few years, I think the Raptors could definitely be in championship contending. Just really depends on how each player develops. I think Scotty Barnes is going to be a very great defensive player in the league. Same thing with OG Anunoby too, very good defenders. Siakam, Fred VanVleet, they're going to be the veterans on this team, which is going to be good because this young team needs some veterans, and any young team needs some veterans. Like Minnesota Timberwolves, they don't really have any veterans. They did bring in Patrick Beverley, which is good, so there's that. But any rebuilding team slash young team, they definitely need some vets on the team with some experience. So honestly, Gary Trent Jr., I think he's here to stay. I love Gary Trent Jr. I like what he does. I like his game a lot. Good three-point shooter. So that can also play some defense too, which is pretty great. So good two-way player that can be very great for the Raptors in terms of being a good role player. So Gary Trent Jr., I like him and hope he's here to stay. So that's the video. My name is JDC, and I'm signing out here. Peace.